should. So, I have always wondered why what we call what we do as a practice. Somebody has asked this question. Well, that's a topic that can take 30 minutes to discuss. But this is one thing which we really have to keep it in mind. And one of the reasons is that our medical science and patients are so unpredictable in the sense that with the same treatment, you find different reactions and different responses. Maybe that could be the reason why the word practice has come. Now, all those who are into reading, the Voltaire is one, who has really been given, he's been giving a kind of, not very positive definitions about doctors. But I think that at times such things are also very important because they become eye openers. So the Voltaire said that doctors are who prescribe medicines of which they know little, to cure the diseases of which they know less, and in the human beings of whom they know nothing. Now, if you see this, at one glance you might feel agitated, but then if you just look at what happened in this, or even already happening, but it's right now on the wane, what we have done in a corona, and if you just see this, I think the Voltaire, what he says, absolutely fits in. And in many places, this is what we have been experiencing. So, rather than getting offended by this definition should be an eye opener for us. And the last one I like, in the human beings of whom they know nothing. This is very, very important, and I'm going to touch the topic, again and again. So as I said that once when I was giving this topic, the lecture on this, and somebody was saying that, well, stethoscope. But then my point is, the stethoscope is a symbol or a metaphor. And it's a metaphor of what? It's a metaphor of our clinical skills. Now, it does not mean it is just auscultation or just examining the patient. It is, whole as a whole, that how much interest you are taking in a patient, spending time, and all our clinical skills that we have been taught, in a medical school. So this is very, very important. And another symbol is about our holistic care. So when you are looking at the stethoscope, that is the symbol of somebody being a doctor. And somebody being a doctor means that it has to be very master in clinical skills because that is expected out of him. And the holistic care, where you don't look at just one part of the patient, but you look a patient as a whole. We are classmates, and so till 1984, till date, it has been my unfinished and enchanting journey, which has been through many joyous, trying, and at times even frustrating moments. And I'm sure this you also share with me, that you also must have had the same. And I witnessed the metamorphosis in medical practice, and more so in last 10 years. There is a tremendous change in the way the medical science or medical practice is being carried out. So when I say this, and I take you further to our next, lecture, it's basically introspection for all of us. And, we have a stalwarts who are listening. So basically they are the one whom we should look up to. So it's a introspection for all of us, including me. And let's take this journey further. Well, I still remember that history was something which in our residency program was considered so important in the case presentations. And it is so important that the patient actually tells you everything. So once considered a history taking is, don't you agree that it itself has become a history? How many doctors really spend time today and ask the questions which are supposed to be asked? If you ask that, if you listen to the patient, and the answer that you get is, who has a time? That's something which, but I don't think that is a answer which really is acceptable, because when you are a medico, when you are a doctor, when you take a Hippocratic oath, the history is something which you have to begin with, and you just can't escape from that. So I'm a big fan of William Osler, and I would suggest that everybody should read him. And maybe you might find a little bit, kind of fascinated by him, because I might quote his quotations several times. What he said is, listen to the patient, he is telling you the diagnosis, and it is so true. Now, the time does not permit, but then it would be important and pertinent to give you a couple of examples. And I'm sure there are so many, if you really want to dedicate one lecture, I'm sure everybody can talk about 2-3 cases that they know. But these are not the created stories, but I still remember one patient who had a jaundice, and he was, from post to pillar he was going, and patient had gone to ultimately gastroenterologist. I'm not saying and taking anything away from any doctor, please, because I can also make the same mistake. But I just happened to be lucky. Let me put it that way. And then ultimately, when the autoimmune, because they did not find any etiology, so they went up to autoimmune disease, and then ultimately was told to undergo liver biopsy. Now, the patient actually somehow ended up with me, and then, I remember that all our teachers have taught us that at least four things you should always ask, and I always remember those points, is that are you taking any other medicine? This is one question. He said, yeah, well, I've been taking one medicine for now 6 months, and doctor medicines on my own. And what was that medicine? And he wasn't even told what medicine were. They were indicated. So the patient. The same way, I still remember one patient of, heart blocks, very high degree heart blocks with severe bradycardia. And the patient was referred for kind of, pacing. I still remember I was also there, part of it. And then, we just look at the investigations, everything was done. But the patient's electrolytes were not done. Patients had a very high potassium, and the history was that patient was on aldactone and ARBs. So what I'm trying to say is that the patient definitely will stay to really listen to the patients. And I think this is the biggest mistake that we are doing. And in the process, we keep on overdoing the things which are really not necessary. So history, I cannot, overemphasize. All of us, those who are of my age, would still remember, the case presentation of inspection, palpation, percussion, and auscultation. It's gone. It's obsolete. I still wonder whether the today's doctors would really talk about this. And I think this is something which is very important, because this is the way your approach should be, and it definitely helps. If I have to share a few, examples, this has been a kind of a, dictum that once a patient who is labeled as having a dyspnea because of, let's say, COPD, he remains COPD patient, wherever he goes. So, and sometimes patients don't improve and then say, oh, COPD is a thankless job, And at least two patients I remember that, you don't put the stethoscope, because I don't think it was a very rocket science to detect any ejection systolic murmur in aortic area. I mean, it's not that it is a big thing that you have done, but the big thing you have done, I don't think even it's big. The thing which I should have done, or any doctor should have done, is put the stethoscope. Patient had a classical ejection, then, the patient had AS. In a lighter vein, I still know one of the patient who was being managed by a pulmonologist, and the patient was, taken as a COPD, very young pulmonologist. And patient was not fine, and patient came to me, and then, I saw this, and then he actually called me, sir, what was it? I said, well, aortic stenosis. And I just told him that, clinically also you should, sometimes even pro-BNP helps. And now and then onwards, what happened? Every patient of breathlessness of COPD, which he came to him, he started doing pro-BNP. So this is what I'm trying to say, that examination is very important. Another one patient I still remember, patient of a young guy who was at severe chest pain. And, ECG had changes also. But I still remember the teaching that Dr. B.T. Dave gave us was, any patient of chest pain, you should make sure that you palpate both the pulses, both the hands and pulse in hand and leg. And then in a young patient, you would be rewarded. And this patient had a, dissection of aorta. So otherwise, this patient would have ended up with angiography and time would have wasted. In fact, it has happened also. So I think clinical examination is something very, very important, and we should really inculcate that in the young doctors. So in a recent study in USA, Canada, and England, it was found that the correct assessment on auscultation was made in 22%, 26%, and 20% of patients. Unfortunately, we don't have such data, or not the attitude of creating such data. If we do that, I don't know what would those numbers be. So William Osler said that medicine is learned by the bedside and not in the classroom. Let not your conception of manifestations of disease come from work heard in the lecture room or read from the book. See and then research, compare and control, but see first. I think this is very, very important. A patient, who is not properly examined as a rashes all over his abdomen, but the shirt is not taken off. And that's why you miss so many diagnoses. A patient who had a herpes zoster and the patient came with chest pain, doctor did not even bother to look at or examine him or take the shirt off. ECG was taken, patient thought it was just the allergy, did not report. The nurse also thought that this could be just, one of those rashes, so did not report. And then when ECG was normal, doctor said, let's do echo. And then he actually took the shirt up and he found that it was a herpes zoster. So this should not happen. So this is something very, very important. The Louis Debeke book gave a beautiful thing. If I have to give one slide for the whole thing for the doctors today, I think this sums up everything. An inquiring, analytical mind, I am reminded of Vaishnav Sahib, an unquenchable thirst for new knowledge, and a heartfelt compassion for the ailing. These are prominent traits among the committed clinicians who have preserved the passion for medicine. I think passion is something very, very important. Rather than being, oh my God, it's too much of work and it is too much of problem, you have to have the passion. And ignoring clinical science is like constructing a big building without strong foundations. So however technology develops, your foundation has to be strong, and this foundation cannot be there without basic clinical science. And this is one thing which can never be debated, which can never be disagreed upon. I would suggest that everybody should read this book, or some of you might have read. It's a wonderful book by Lisa. It's Every Patient Tells a Story. There are beautiful, beautiful cases, and where, the clinical, so many investigations were done, and how a simple clinical observation solved the case. So I would strongly recommend that this is available. But the point is, patient tells the story, but do we listen? And if I have to take it further from the perspective of the youngsters, do we have time to listen? And who cares? We have investigations to prove. Why bother and why waste time on that? So please don't do that, because you will end up overdoing. Now, if you see, this is the step which we have already been told, a history which is well elicited, a thorough clinical examination. And if you do this too, what will happen is that you end up doing only the relevant investigations, and you don't end up doing a plethora of investigation or tsunami of investigation that we see these days. And through this, you can come to a correct diagnosis, and in turn, the patient always will be benefited. So I consider this as a clinical poetry. We are actually creating poetry every day if you have, if you do a clinical science very properly. And this is one thing I'm not going to take much time, but this is what I have observed now. That the way the patients are, asked and managed and examined. I'm not talking about all, but I've seen many doctors, either their foot is on a bed. I'm not exaggerating while asking the question, and the way they ask, the way they examine, as if they're examining some kind of a object. So please make sure that you handle the patient as a human, and this is very, very important. Now, investigations, I'm not against, in fact, they are the boon to medical practice. There is no question about it. Nobody can argue that. And as the investigations also become finer and better and more sophisticated, and now a lot of things are coming. But my point is that if you have to ask ourselves a question, are we not overdoing? Are we not over-relying on investigations? I'm sure your answer would be yes, because some experts estimate that at least $200 billion is wasted annually on excessive testing and treatment. This is US data, because I just tried to find Indian data from Google, I did not find. There was one survey which showed that 22% of the prescription medication, 25% of medical tests, 11% of procedures, and 20% of overall medical care delivered is unnecessary. Now, this is something which should be an eye-opener for everybody. And so this is what is a very common thing. I'll just try to make it light in between. You are at a teaching hospital, hence all the tests. You have to do all the tests. You may or may not need it. It's a different question. Now, this is the artificial intelligence or in your technology. It's of course spoken in a lighter vein just to prove a point. And what is they say? Nurse, get in on the internet, go to surgery.com, scroll down and click on the "Are you totally lost?" So because you just Maybe this is a little bit exaggerated version, but what he's trying to say, or what I'm trying to say, is that the problem is not the technology. Technology is good. In fact, technology has done wonders, and technology has really done so many things which are really boon to medical practice, medical health, the longevity of the patients, and betterment of the patient. But the problem is the way it is utilized, and that's my point that I'm just trying to drive it. The human spirit must prevail over technology. Albert Einstein said long back, and I think this is so true for medical technology, because I feel that we have become servants to technology rather than its master. And this is very important. We have really, honestly speaking, we become total servants to technology. What technology says, you decide. You don't look at the patient as a whole. You don't use your point and your examination skills or your, knowledge of a patient as a doctor. But once the technology is said, well, there is a shadow. That shadow may not be clinically important, but you keep on doing everything. Uh, And this is what I call addiction to technology, isn't it? Addressing the foundational issues of efficacy, equity, and cost effectiveness in our health system will require us to beat our addiction to technology. I think, and then what happens that this is a very common story, that the common happening and common scenario that we see in these days is that, all the doctors, once they have that help, the help, the technology help is around, patients procalcitonin will decide whether the patient has got infection or not. That's that, and then you do procalcitonin 3 times a day in ICU, which is very not very unusual. And so my point is that the addiction to technology is going to really make our problem even worse, because that's what you are not even helping the patient, you are not helping yourself as your development as a doctor. So foundational issue of efficacy, equity, and cost effectiveness. 3 questions you must ask ourselves when you're actually handling the patient. So as I said, that I'm not against, nobody can be against technology, and nobody can say that technology is bad. Nobody says that technology is something which should not be there. What I'm trying to say is that we should be judicious in ordering and interpreting the investigation. That how can you do that? If you have got a very basic sound clinical science, if you have listened to the patient, if you examine the patient properly, then it will become a judicious use of investigation. Now, over-reliance on reports, what it leads to? What we call it intelligence laziness. And I think that's what we find. And there's a total neglect of basic skill. Who wants to put your, or, break your head, whether there is a systolic murmur or whether it's a diastolic murmur, whether there is an opening snap, who cares? You have an echo, do it. And why waste time on that? So I call it as a hyposkelia, which is gradually creeping in our young doctors, which really are reliant so much on and when I say young doctors, please don't feel that I'm talking about every doctor. I'm just saying in general. So nobody should take it personally. So this is my observation, and I'm sure that patient is improving, but the reports are deteriorating. So I still remember one patient, for some reason, his blood gas was deteriorating. Patient was feeling much better. The relatives are feeling that why he's, just kept in ICU and he himself is so good. So it's not very uncommon scenario, isn't it? But the point is, and I always tell this to my all young doctors who come to me, that please, reports should not dictate the treatment. Reports should help you in making your diagnosis better, because we end up treating the reports and not the patient. Look at the recent corona. I mean, you cannot have a better example than that, better realization than that the D dimer of 700, or you find a RT-PCR score of 18 was so important that this patient is going to die. Now all of us know that it only indicates how much virus was there localized in the throat. There was no correlation between RT-PCR values and the severity of disease. But still, you start treating the patient. Say with the CT scan score, it's another topic by itself. But we have experienced this time, and so we end up treating the reports and not the patient, and that is the big problem. And that's why in all this process, the common sense has become very uncommon. The common sense is the knack of seeing the things as they are, doing the things as they ought to be done. That's once again, the corona has actually told us everything what common sense should be. And that's why the over-reliance on technology is a rest in peace common sense. And I'm sure all of you would definitely agree on this. So this is eventually, it's a cartoon says everything. That he's telling the skeleton that let's do an X-ray just to be sure. Just to be sure, do something syndrome are something which are really ailing in today's medical health world. Now coming to the medication, the abuse and misuse, everybody knows the personal fancies for medication not supported in literature. And if I share one, very hilarious example, I'm talking about something which was almost 30 years back in one of the peripheries of Anand. At that time, only streptokinase was available, and one doctor, senior general practitioner of that area, had a heart attack, and they requested me, sir, somehow you come. So I went to. He was a physician in that small town, and we the dose that we used to give, he said that, sir. I said, why you given half the dose? He said, મને તો આવું જ ફાવે. I said, well, no. આપણે તો શું કરવાનું સાહેબ? અડધો ડોઝ મેલને આપવાનો ને 1/4 ડોઝ ફિમેલને આપવાનો. So, આવી રીતે જ થાય સાહેબ. અને આ રીતે ફાવે જ છે એટલે આપણે કરીએ. So these are personal fancies. And this is my sentence which has been, very well approved because it is true. Everything is fair in love, war, and ICU. Now, let me tell you that, many times we find ICU is a hodgepodge where I think a serious patient, you find 7 multi-specialists, just knocking him and giving their own opinions. And I have seen 8 or 7 or 8 antibiotics going on. And when you ask the question that, why do you want to give 7 antibiotics? He said, well, we don't want to take chance. Now, what kind of chance? And I said, okay, you explain me why 7 antibiotics and which organisms you kept in mind and why broad spectrum also. He says, no, sir, it's not a question of a patient, otherwise would die. I said, what happens if the patient dies because of this? Well, he had no answer. But the reason is that we have never talked about drug interaction. It's totally an overlooked thing. So please, I'm sure that we can definitely do something about this, that ICU is not the place where, yeah, I understand. You can be a little more broad spectrum. Maybe we can do a little bit extra. I don't deny that part. But you just can't doing something which you would suggest that, oh my God, you can just give as many things. When you are doing, I've seen people doing procalcitonin 3 times a day. Now that is ridiculous, isn't it? So I think all these things should be, and if there's a professional or commercial angle, God bless them. This is not that you are here for as a doctor. And this is another thing which is happening, that clinical trials and the guidelines and the prevention detection. So there's a confusion, because you find there's a change horse. And that is where you as a basic doctor, your common sense as a doctor, your understanding of the patient, your understanding of the disease, your understanding really comes into play. And all the trials or maybe the guidelines, you have to interpret it in the way it will be useful to the patient. Now, if you look at the chaos in management of COVID, you saw that people gave alnastatin and people gave IVIGs and people gave whatnot, and everything was free and everything was fair because there was nothing, nobody was able to know, going to kind of see on that or check on that or audit on that. And this, I think COVID should be a very great eye opener for our medical practice, how we really have to, straighten ourselves up, organize ourselves up. And so the problem is that you say that the good news, your cholesterol has stayed the same, but the research findings have changed. And so there is a very good article, I still remember in Lentus a few years back, we were talking about the evidence-based medicine. So they said that where is the evidence in evidence-based medicine? My point is that, EBM is not bad, but you have to take it with a common sense. If you do that, then everything should be fine. We are looking for right answers, but the problem is we are asking the wrong questions, isn't it? And then when you ask the wrong question, you are never going to get answers. And that's what is happening in so many patients, that you are going in a different field because you're not examining the patient properly. And that's why you're asking the wrong questions. So knowledge versus wisdom, if I have to give a very simple example, everybody knows that tomato is a fruit, but that's a knowledge. But the wisdom is that you don't put tomato in a fruit salad, right? So that's what I'm saying, that when the patient has come to you, if you are sound in physical science, then you would ask the right questions. If you're asking the wrong questions from word go, well, you understand that it would be a real mess. Now, this is the problem. You have a rare condition called good health. And frankly, I'm not sure how to treat it. We are not used to this. In fact, this should be our goal, that we give good health, good prevention, but who cares for that? So this is a very, very bad scenario. Now, coming to this important part is misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. It's happening in up to 30% of the patient. Now, Institute of Medicine reported that up to 98,000 people die each year due to hospital mistake. This was only in the US. I don't know whether we have data. If anybody knows it, I would be very glad to know from him. The Americans experience about 12 million diagnostic errors a year. In US, 28% of misdiagnoses are life-threatening or life-altering, and misdiagnosis and diagnostic errors make up about 10% of patient deaths and 17% of patients' adverse events in hospital setting. Isn't this a very important stats that we should look at? And another point I want to touch is about doctor-patient relationship. It is definitely deteriorating. And somebody jokingly saying that only equipment lack in the modern hospital, somebody to meet you at the entrance with a handshake. It hardly happens. Nobody, that's really missing. And there are three types of doctor-patient relationship which I have observed. One is called the paternalistic. What happens is doctor knows the best model. I know everything, and patient will receive what the doctors believe the best for them. They don't tell everything, right? And what they need to know. I feel what my patient should know, and I tell only that much. There's an informative type where doctor supplies up-to-date knowledge and skills. Retail relationship between, it's like the expert and consumer kind of thing. Like, for example, if patient comes and if I have to give a thrombolytic, then I just start giving him data that from this is the data. So doctors knows less and less about patient and more about science. And the interpretive is the shared decision making. What is most important for you and what are your worries? This is the thing. So you decide what do you want to be in a doctor-patient relationship and what kind of relationship you have. I think this is the reason why you find a lot of problems between the community and doctors. At sometimes, you don't like doctors being attacked, which is totally wrong and condemnable. But at the same time, why don't we look in that what exactly is happening? The happening is that patients are not told at all, the relatives are not at all told at all that what exactly is the issue and many circumstances. And so you will be happier if you have nothing to hide. This is very important that you must have the transparency, tell everything. At times, I still remember one surgeon long back in US, I happened to meet him, and he said that I made a mistake. The first thing they said, oh, no, first thing he said, I went out and told, look, I made a mistake. And it was very well accepted. Of course, somebody would argue that it will not happen here. But what I'm trying to say is that lack of transparency is the root problem of all the ills. Well, ethics, less said is better. The market forces push up the excessive use of medications and devices. All of us know that. Well, there are so lots of data, especially after this ischemia trial. What we have seen is that, lots of stenting is done, which may not be necessary. The escalated use of these modalities, many times unwarranted, a lot of leave to ponder. And I think at the end of the day, you should look within. Your conscience is, what does it say? Because I always believe there is no right way to do a wrong thing. You just can't justify anything which you have done wrong way. So I think this is one thing which we must really pass on to our young generation. And I've seen the change in attitude, all of you over the past, let's say, all of us are practicing for so many years. And the clinical part is definitely going downhill and the investigation part is going uphill and uphill and uphill. And investigations are treated. The clinical part is not taken care into. The personal, care is going because now the personal doctors are really getting into minority. The corporate structure is on. And so the personal rapport is gone. Those general practitioners who are just like a family man, it's all gone. And instead, the commercial angle is really going up. If I have to put one arrow, it will go beyond this laptop. So this is one thing which is really happening. And I think it's worrisome. Well, this is very common. When the patient is being seen by so many super specialists, the nephrologist will only look at his part. The cardiologist will only look at his part. The endocrinologist will look at his part. But who is there to put the threads together? Because the patient, the elephant, it does not have only one leg as a part of the animal or the human body as a whole. And I think this is one problem. This is happening. That what about the holistic approach? So being doctor is much more than simply providing medical care. And this is one thing which we always should keep in mind. Once again, the William Osler's, it's very, very important. This is one statement I think we should really frame it and understand and keep, at least try to practice in our day-to-day medical care. It's more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease the person has. And this was one data which came in which area the patients are dissatisfied. Now imagine if you see the 22% was the attitude of the doctor, management was 13%, misdiagnosis was 12%, failure to visit was 9%, inadequate or wrong advice is 8%, Medication prescribing errors, 8%. Failure to examine adequately. Now, people do notice this. See what I'm trying to say, 6%. And poor communication is 6%. I think if this data has to come in India, I would say that poor communication would be number one. And I think these are the things which we should be keeping in mind. So, I'm sure everybody has read this wonderful book, Being Mortal by Dr. Atul Gawande. It's a beautiful book, and I would strongly recommend if you're not read it. He says the beautiful thing that we have been wrong about what our job is in medicine. We think our job is to ensure health and survival, but really it is larger than that. It is to enable well-being. And that's the point which I've been driving all throughout. So this is something very important. And well, at the same time, the last few minutes, I would like to touch that, it's not that doctors don't know this, because I would also accept, and I definitely accept that over the time when the entire medical practice style has changed, partly it has to do with a lot of society norms which have changed. And I don't deny that part. And that part I also, sympathize with my friend. But at the same time, you just can't get away from certain basic things which you are supposed to do. Like one thing is emerging disease, the Google syndrome, more trust in Google than doctors, which is so annoying. And I think our own attitudes over our colleagues, a patient who is on a 4 anti-diabetic drugs with 11.1% ANC coming to me as a second or third opinion, and I would say, well, you need insulin. And then he goes to someone other doctor and say, no, insulin is not needed, although he knows that scientifically it has to be done. So a lot of things, which we can discuss about our attitudes, our own colleagues, and that's something which needs to change. And I think changing milieu of society, it's very, very important. The high and at times unrealistic expectations, all of you understand this because we don't have time to go into details of each and everything. Everybody wants a quick results, and that's why they put a lot of pressure. Now, as I call them directors, what happened that patients, relatives and neighbors and everybody, they actually decide what is to be done. And they keep on pressurizing doctors. Why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And there is a reality is not accepted. A patient who is in a cardiogenic shock with a gross LVF with NT-MI, you understand that their chances are less, and that's the reality we can't accept because the death is not accepted. Although it was bound to come irrespective of what. And in spite of this, doctor still keeps on trying to do everything. So I think reality is not accepted. And as I said, that do something syndrome has really been troublesome. So it takes a lot to decide that I don't know, if you can't do anything, oh well, you have not done anything. So do something. In corona, you can't do, okay, give Alnastatin, do something. You give IVIG, give something. So it's something which is a do something syndrome, which is very, very problematic, and we have to face it. So the last slide, let me say that, let me take you this slide. I gave one lecture on the future of medical technology. And for the want of time, what I'm doing is, these are the things which are coming. In fact, some of them are already here. For example, Larry Page's wife, the Google Larry Page, she has one organization in California. What you have to do? They do the DNA testing for only $50. You have to spit in a test tube, and that test tube actually goes to that institution, and they will tell you everything about your chances of getting heart attack and so on and so forth. So this is the future which is already here, like robots and 3D printing and biosensors and nanomedicine and the biomedical engineering, artificial intelligence, pharmacogenomics, big data, virtual reality, and augmented reality. But when I was seeing this, you get fascinated, oh my God, what happens to a doctor? But my point is that whatever happens, the doctor would be needed, because who is going to put these trades together? Who is going to decide which is good for this patient? Who is going to decide what is going to work for this patient? Who is going to decide whether this patient will respond or not? It's only physician. So whatever the future, whatever the technology, whatever comes, you will never be able to undermine the importance of a human being called physician, because he is ultimately the one who would decide, and because the patient's interest is definitely physician knows the best. Whatever your 3D printing says, it's 3D printing is not going to decide, or your, the big data might give you some analysis, does not mean that it's going to, work on this patient. Virtual reality, fine, but then who is going to really dictate on that? Who is going to give a final comment on that? Who is going to make sure that this is going to be effective for the patient? It is physician, physician, and physician. So we should feel ourselves, a kind of blessed to become physicians. The God has really given us this opportunity to do something good for the people that around us. And not everybody gets this kind of opportunity to make somebody well from the disease. And I think we cannot let go of this opportunity away from us and make sure that we make the best use of it. Because ultimately, I always say the choice is yours. You wish to be a doctor dictated by technology, or you want to be a doctor who treats patients with compassion, care, commitment, and common sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hemant. It was wonderful. Actually, under the umbrella of clinical medicine or the title, Where is my stethoscope? I think you have covered or highlighted so many issues which is, I think, plaguing our medical system, right from education to practice. So it was wonderful to have a list of problems that we have. Initially, actually, I made a remark that we have managed to diminish the importance of clinical medicine. So now is the time to undo that. How to undo that? One of the ways is to have this kind of talks and seminars, but I would invite comments from Hemant as well as others as to how to make it a movement, to bring back the clinical medicine, how to revive the clinical medicine. Because the audience that you see here in Saturday Club is an elite audience, which are actually doing what you are actually telling us to do. But how to go to the people actually who are not following clinical medicine?
In a way, I'm happy that there are people whom actually we have idolized, Satish Bhai and Vaishnav Sahib and all these people, we have seen that how great they were as clinicians. But my point is that when they are in the audience, this is one frustration which I really wanted to share. Now, let me give you one remedy. I was just discussing with some of our colleagues, because I gave this lecture before somewhere else also. And, our classmate, she said that, even in United States of America today, the clinical examination is a must. And all of us would be knowing, and I'm sure they know better than me. So this is still there. And in fact, one of my friends from US doctor is our classmate. She said that, Hemant, why don't people put stethoscope here on patient? She took her mother to one super specialist, and super specialist asked few questions in Baroda. And then he said, okay, do this. And he said, Hemant, I did not tell him, but then he did not put stethoscope. He did not put take the patient inside and examine what has happened. So in US, so my point is, you have to start only at a medical college level. You just can't do anything after. Right. It's something very important that our professors, and I'm sure the onus is on us, that we make sure that we do it again at college level and keep on giving such kind of lectures to them. Then and then only we will be able to perhaps solve this problem to some extent. More comments.
On 17th, we have Dr. Jagdish Chinappa to talk about medical ethics. Jagdish, you have some comments on this subject?
I must congratulate Dr. Hemant for a brilliant lecture, absolutely outstanding lecture. And the quality of his slides and presentations are something else. And I really congratulate him for his presentation skills as well as the content. So couple of things. One is, I think he has brought out so many things which are very, very valid in today's environment. However, I feel that maybe some of us are clinging to the past. And I don't know whether how this is going to pan out in the next 20 years. So, yes, I'm a big fan of Sir William Osler. In fact, I don't know if Dr. Hemant has seen the new encyclopedia which has just come out this year on Sir William Osler. And incidentally, one of the thing I've contributed to that book, to that encyclopedia. So I think the point is, maybe we are all clinging to some kind of a philosophy which is the past philosophy. Maybe things are moving different. Maybe we have to rechange and re-engineer our way of looking at things. Clinical medicine, no doubt, is important. The person is very important. But again, the issue is that the future generation will be looking at this entirely very differently. So maybe we'll have to reincorporate our thinking to match their thinking also. So that may be that's some of my comments. The other comment I had was, he has mentioned all my favorite authors, and I think all of them have written great books. And one other book which I would strongly recommend is Pat Croskery on cognitive errors in medicine, where we know that we make so many shortcuts in our thinking. We don't ever go into the entire full analysis of any patient in toto. We try to take shortcuts based on a rapid clinical examination, maybe some cursory looking at the reports, and reach some kind of a problem solving mode. So I think those are some of the issues which also are very important. Wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jagdish. We have another Jagdish Bhai with us. Another Jagdish Bhai with us. Our respected very senior Jagdish Bhai. I am expecting some comments from you, sir.
Yeah, see, we had great clinical teachers like Dr. Ambegaonkar, Dr. Sanat Shah, and batches were small. We were just 60 students in medical batch, and clinical medicine was so well demonstrated. I don't know how it is being done right now with 250 students in a classroom, and most of the time lectures not being attended, clinical science not being demonstrated. So fault lies right from medical education. And with technology and clinical medicine, we will have to do a balancing act. Technology is also very helpful.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, Tushar.
સતીશભાઈ, મારે એક ખાસ વાત એ કહેવાની છે કે હું છેલ્લા 30 વર્ષથી ડોક્ટર સતીશ શાહ જોડે એમના ક્લિનિકમાં એમની બાજુની જ ખુરશીમાં બેસતો હતો અને મેં જોયું કે જ્યારે પણ હિસ્ટ્રી લે તાર 2 પાનાની હિસ્ટ્રી હોય એ ફેમિલી હિસ્ટ્રીથી માંડીને પર્સનલ હિસ્ટ્રી લે પણ અમેઝિંગ સ્કિલ ટુ આસ્ક ધ પર્સનલ હિસ્ટ્રી, ફેમિલી હિસ્ટ્રી, ટોટલ કેસ હિસ્ટ્રી લાઈક એ મેડિકલ ડોક્ટર, ફિઝિશિયન. અને તમે નહીં માનો, છેલ્લા 30 વર્ષમાં મેં રિનલ ટ્યુબરક્લોસિસ.
Your voice has gone. Tushar, we can't hear you. His net is unstable, it seems. Anyway. Any other comments?
Satish Bhai, I'll just continue Tushar's comments.
Yes.
We learned from Satish Bhai before the Atul Gawande book checklist, all the history like a pediatrician. Pediatricians and physicians are ideal. But we learned the checklist from Dr. Satish Bhai's case paper.
Hello.
Yes. Tushar Bhai, please continue.
Tushar, your net is unstable, so please continue.
એટલે મારે એવું કહેવાનું છે કે ડોક્ટર હેમંત તંતાણી જે કીધું એ ઘણું જ સાચું છે. અને કોઈ પણ ક્લિનિકલ હિસ્ટ્રીમાં અથવા ક્લિનિકલ એક્ઝામિનેશનમાં છે આપણને પેશન્ટનું ડાયગ્નોસિસ મળી જાય. અને એનું એક ઉદાહરણ આ રિનલ ટ્યુબરક્લોસિસ મેં તમને વાત કરીએ. સતીશભાઈને અમેઝિંગ સ્કિલ્સ હતી અને જે આઈ હેવ ઓલ્સો લર્ન ઇન માય NSCF pre-anesthetic examinations. Thank you.
So what I consider these examples that our seniors set for us, I think we should try to set examples for our juniors. So all of us consultants who are having some juniors with you, we must show all these clinical skills and set good examples. We should play the role models. That is my understanding out of this discussion, because what we can do is more important than what government can do. ICMR and other things, MCI and all those are working on education, and I understand there are a lot of improvements going on. New programs are being set up. So that is not in our realm to actually address the medical education. But what we as medical practitioners can do is to set good examples. I think Dr. Vandana has been raising hand. I do not know whether it is by mistake or she wants to make a point.
Satish bhai, પોતે કઈ કાપો ને comment સતીશ ભાઈ ને કહો ને.
સતીશ ભાઈ, હા સર બોલો તો સારું છે.
Dr. Vivek Jain here.
Yes.
Can I raise a question?
Can we first ask Dr. Satish Bhai sir to speak and then you can take.
Yes, please.
Satish sir, તમે બોલો સાહેબ. અવાજ નથી. ના સ્પીકર નથી લાગતું. કોઈ બીજા ડિવાઇસ થી I think is. We can't hear you, sir.
Now?
Yes, we can hear you, sir, now. Please.
See, I learned clinical history taking and practice not in Baroda, but in Lehi Clinic in America. There was one checklist of about 200 questions, and they showed us that how you can take all the 200 questions within 4 minutes.
Oh.
And I practiced that. I actually copied that case paper And even today, if any patient comes, for example, Tushar himself, I will take complete history and then start thinking of examination, and the examination has changed. It for a surgeon, but I have seen many urologists not doing PR and sending PSA and ultrasound. They make a big mistake. So this is something, it depends upon what specialty you are. Right. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you. Vivek, you wanted to say something. Vivek.
Yes. Haan, sir. So my question was, suppose there is a patient who goes to two doctors, a cardiologist or something of that sort. So one doctor says that surgery is indicated. Another doctor says that surgery is definitely not indicated. So what does the patient do in such a case?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Third doctor.
They obviously, doctor. I mean, it's as simple as that. You know, what happens is that you are talking about the surgery, but I'm telling you something else. You know, even for sugar level, people go to 3 labs.
Oh my.
Yeah, this is very common story. You know, yeah, what happens for some reason, they are not happy because they want the diagnosis with they wish. Now that does not happen. But what Vivek said is a very true scenario. I'll give you one example. For example, a patient who has got triple vessel disease and still, being stented in a stable patient. Yeah, if the patient has got acute coronary syndrome, well, we can understand that the infarcted related artery you open up. But if a patient who is stable and has a, angina, and you find stress is strongly positive in triple vessel disease. Now, in that, if you do the stent, now, Vivek, you said is something which is a very, very important point, because that is where I say that you cannot get away from the medical principles. The person who must have said that you don't need surgery wanted to put 3 stents. And I'm just telling you that, and he may not be wrong in a way, but then if the patient is diabetic and nobody wants to say that, okay, these are the data which is there and that's why you should do this. So I think this is one area where only doctors themselves can look within, as I said, and introspect and look at your concerns and decide. Otherwise,
I would also tell the patient that medical science is incomplete and there are many gray areas where 2 doctors may not agree. So when they are visiting 2, 3, 4 doctors, I'll tell them that whoever doctor you feel you are comfortable with, go by his advice rather than going for a 5th opinion. They are medical shoppers, so they need our guidance then. Sir, so I tell them that wherever you feel comfortable, go to him. You have seen different pictures.
Moreover, we can't decide for patient. We have to decide what we should do.
Yeah, that is true. When it comes to our see, Hemant, what happens is that I am not a surgeon. So there are certain situations where they have confusion regarding whether to go for surgery or not. I can give my wisdom, but then there are issues, delicate issues between line of demarcation, whether to go for surgery or not. So it's a very common dilemma that we face as clinicians.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Right. That clarifies.
Sir, Suresh Amin, sir, you wanted to say something?
This current symptom of violence against doctors and cases against doctors are symptom of what we do not do.
Very true.
See, violence against doctors, we have so many litigations. And the other day I heard Narendra Modi that evidence-based medicine is a key thing to medical science, and this should not be forgotten.
Yeah, I think there is Sulin who wants to say something. Yes, Hemant, you can respond to this.
My pranam to Amin Sahib. You may not remember me, but I remember him so well. I'm Vipul Dholakia's cousin, so to say. When I got my MD in '84. Sir, your point is very, very valid. And I think my opinion is that, of course, the society as a whole has definitely changed. But let's look within, let's not pass the buck to the other side. I personally feel that is the communication. Sir, hardly people talk about the patient's actual scenario to the doctor, to the relatives. And what happens that when they are not expecting anything which they have not been told, and that happens, and of course, that is also condemnable that they just can't go and beat the doctor. But the point is that this kind of anger is mainly because communication error. So I think this is one thing which we must tell our juniors, and I've been telling that, all the junior cardiologists who are doing. I said, you always talk everything in detail, that exactly what they are. Okay, do it once. You don't have to keep on telling it to every relative. What I do is I call all five, said, okay, how many important people are there? Just bring them one. And I will tell everything, all the options, all the possibilities. And I think if you do that, perhaps to a great extent, this problem might be solved. Right. But your point is very, very clear.
Yeah, Sulin, quick comment, and then Dr. Manoj. Then we will end the session. Sulin, please.
Excellent lecture, sir. Congratulations to you and Dr. Antani, sir. Concerned about your appeal, that I suggest that if we percolate such ethical practices and clinical based skills to all the doctors regularly at regular intervals, then only they can sensitize. So more and more number of such sessions are needed, and to the practicing doctors. See, the resident doctors at the medical college are being exposed regularly with their teachers, and they know how to take the history and clinical. So private practitioners needs more exposure like this.
Right, Sulin.
And one more question to Dr. Hemant, sir. So how to stand telemedicine where there is absence of clinical examination?
I think, telemedicine has its own role because it has got plus and minus both. But biggest plus is that, some areas, for example, a diabetic patient basically just has to monitor blood sugar and decide the dose. So some kind of patients will definitely be benefited by telemedicine because they don't need to visit, because that is, unless they have got developed any other problems, then they have to see. One more advantage of telemedicine is that you can go to the remotest area. That is something which is now becoming possible. So, of course, there are more advantages, but as I said, with every technology, right now it is medico-legally fine, but I don't know whether some lawyer, would create problems for you. So you have to be very careful in your telemedicine, that the type of patients you handle and to what level. At some level, you have to say that, well, I can't tell you because I need to see you in person. But you're right, telemedicine is here to stay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Telemedicine, history taking becomes very, very important. Right. Yes. So, Dr. Manoj, you have some comment.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. There was a very nice presentation and words of wisdom heard after a long time. Regarding this patients taking multiple opinions, I would like to add that nowadays most of the people taking on opinion either on phone or coming to the clinic, they are recording our opinion. So we should be very careful when we give our comments, and should be diplomatic rather than very precise. Had a few bad experiences recently.
Shall I tell you something else? You are absolutely right. But now I know some doctors who have started recording.
Okay, sir. So you too should record.
No, not only that. Cameras record. They have gone one step ahead. What they are doing is, especially if you give an example, or if you give an advice of doing this surgery, and all those conversations are taped. And when the patient goes out, one CD is already given to the patient. This is our conversation.
Right. Hemant, this is a routine in NICU practice, neonatal intensive care, where everything is very important, what you are talking to the relatives. So this is being recorded officially. Patients are knowing that this is being recorded. I see Dr. Raju Mangrola. I mean, nice to see you, Dr. Raju.
Wow.
So, Raju, do you have some comment? I was just about to finish the session, but when I saw you, I thought, let us have some comment from you. Please unmute yourself. Raju.
Raju is our dear classmate based in Florida. He's a very, very good psychiatrist and fantastic speaker.
That's why I asked for his comment. Raju, please have some comments on this.
Well, let me just say one thing. I just joined you guys, so I just chimed in.
Okay.
So I didn't hear the rest, but what I just saw everybody's what they were saying. It's very wonderful what Hemant does. So, and I wish it was recorded. I need to listen to it.
We'll share.
And Hemant, you're going outside of the box, and which I love a lot. Okay.
Thank you.
You're bringing up so many important things outside the box. We are like robots, we always think in one way, and we have to start thinking about medicine outside the box. And you are one person who has consistently brought that out. So I commend you for that. So
thank you. Thank you.
And even you Satish, for you guys to have this in the time of pandemic, it's something, it's an eye opener. So
thanks to Satish sir.
Hi Raju.
Oh yeah, he's a good friend. He's a very, very good family friend of ours. Where he's in US right now, but yeah.
Yeah, he's right there on the screen. Anyway.
Oh, he's there. Yeah.
So
I just talked to him about a month ago. So anyway, he was doing.
Yeah, Raju.
Yeah. So anyway, sir, carry on. I don't want to take away your time.
Thank you, Raju.
Thank you,
Raju. It's free. That's the best thing I like about this. You should start charging us. You should start charging us.
The US guys.
No, we will expect some donations. We don't charge. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Raju's feet are unmatched.
So thank you, Heman, for beautiful talk, as everybody has appreciated. Next time, next Saturday, we have our own Dr. Chetan Shah. He'll be talking about what are the recent advances in diabetes, because he has attended one good conference. Then we'll have Dr. Jagdish Chinnappa, who we all saw here. He'll be talking about medical ethics. And on later on, 24th, we'll have one speaker from Australia about talking about COVID management there. So
very nice.
So thank you all for joining. We meet again.
So Satish, one more comment, okay?
Yes.
You're in a tie. I'm in my night dress. Think about it. So
thank you.
Satish bhai, one small correction. I won't be speaking on ethics.
Okay.
I'll be speaking on some kind of history.
Okay, so you want to keep it some sort of a surprise and secret for us?
Yes.
So give me a proper title so that I can communicate with the members.
Yeah, you can put it as premonition.
Okay, you wrote premonition. I didn't understand. Actually, you put it on the WhatsApp. Okay, let it be premonition. Okay, good.
Okay.
So thank you all. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Satish bhai. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.